I think the amendment the Finance Committee made was an unfortunate amendment. I don't think it was well considered. I think it was kind of drafted in the moment. I think the Finance Committee, to be fair, is trying to provide some support for school administration and operations and say, well, we should find some space. But my personal view is that the amendment is ill-conceived. Further, the $350,000 design request that came in the amendment, and the amendment, by the way, is attached here. It's not an amount that was vetted by the Permanent Public Building Committee. It was created that night at the table, which is unusual. And then I think a third point that's important as far as the context is that this swing space that they're referring to, which is language that's in the original amendment, the original article, is really not part of your capital plan, the one that you've already discussed and that presumably you will vote on next Tuesday. So the amendment, in my view, is problematic on a few levels. There are also, I think, consequences, which I've tried to, with Ann and Steve, with their support, try to articulate that. I think the bottom line to this amendment, if it were passed by town meeting, is that you'd be designing a building you really couldn't occupy. I guess maybe that's the simplest way to put it, because the building commissioner has been clear that this has to be a limited duration occupancy of that building, now that police and fire will be leaving. And if students are to reoccupy it, the building commission would like to see other upgrades as well. However, for the purposes of this article and for this plan, just dedicating money to designing a renovation, knowing that the building commissioner may not even offer a building permit, is problematic. And then furthermore, if you got to May town meeting and you were able to secure design funding for Emery Grover, because that's a possible outcome, if the amendment passed, you could go to May town meeting and ask for the design money for Emery Grover. That adds another $500,000 to that project, which was one of the causes for the Finance Committee to withhold on voting to support it. So I guess what I would, the Finance Committee, again, my view, and as your superintendent, I think over these last 16 years has been a strong partner with the school committee. There haven't always been agreement, but the Finance Committee has advocated for things for the schools, including building projects, and they've been very supportive. However, I think in this particular case, they have voted an amendment that is essentially a dead end, and it just, in their words, kicks the can further down the road. So that's what I tried to outline here. What I also provided for you is really just a graphic, because frankly it helps me think through what's what in the blue and the red, and this is a timeline about what could happen. Now, what's in blue here on this chart is what is in your proposed capital plan. And it is really what the subject of the article is all about, that you have voted and that Dr. Barr has presented a video presentation of that's on the town meeting website. What's in red is what the amendment in our view would do, and really at the end is the big question mark. Where does it get you in the end? It at this point does not get school administration operations into a permanent situation, and frankly I think it even exacerbates the situation. So with that, Madam Chair, we would be happy to try to assist you in preparing for. I believe I understand that you will have 5 minutes to present at town meeting on the floor. I know we're going to have another conversation this week with a few folks, but Ann and I certainly, with Steve and Hank, are happy to support whatever you might need to prepare for town meeting and that conversation on Monday.
I believe We're hoping that we have 5 minutes to speak to the warrant article, but also time somehow to speak to the amendment, but that's unclear at this time. We'll be working together and working with select board members on the best way to approach this, but any thoughts or advice you might have will be helpful. I think also I would appreciate hearing from all of you as we talk to town meeting members, which we're hoping to do to provide answers to questions they might have. Please let us know if you have questions. We are really happy to talk to you. What the parts of what I tried to present or we're trying to present are unclear, and where there are major questions on the warrant article. And then our approach to working with this amendment is also going to be important. That's currently unclear what we'll be allowed to do on town meeting floor. I think, to echo some of what Dr. Goodkamp said, it was surprising to see a literal back of the envelope calculation that I don't think would be well thought of if we tried to do that, or if some other group in town tried to create a set of numbers that quickly or without clear evidence. And I'm particularly disturbed about the fact that I think dead end is a good word if we go in this route. So I would entertain any other thoughts or questions or strategies. Liz?
It's more of a question because I'm new to the school committee, and I'm also new to town meeting. I've had only one town meeting so far. My understanding from my town meeting training was that any amendment to an article had to stay within a certain sort of space, right? Had to stay within the spirit of the original article. And this amendment appears to not do that, in my opinion. And so I'm wondering if this amendment, do we know if it's acceptable to town meeting? Is there some way to assess whether or not the amendment actually falls within the appropriate guidelines?
So that's up to the moderator, and the moderator in discussion with the select board has said that he believes this is within the so-called four corners of the original warrant article. So the amendment will be allowed for town meeting. I just checked the town website. The amendment needs to be proposed by a town meeting member. That hasn't yet happened, but that probably will. Mike, did that sort of answer what you wondered, Liz? Michael, were you raising your hand?
Yeah, I agree with the superintendent with you. This was an ill-considered and inappropriate amendment. We all saw some of the dynamics going on at the meeting, but given the time is limited, there was a lot of information we put out. I think our focus ought to be on simply saying that we believe that there is no point in spending more money to kick the can further down the road, only to spend more money later. And we would just urge town meeting to reject the amendment, keep it short, keep it simple, keep the focus on why we need to do this now. I think we will have a lot of support and understanding from town meeting for that. This is like cutting the baby in three. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So, but let's not spend a lot of time on it. Just make it clear that we're spending more money to kick the can further down the road when we've done all this work already. Let's move on and vote on the article. That would be my take. Just town meeting has only so much bandwidth, mental bandwidth, that they can handle with backs and forth and amendments. So let's just make it clear that this really doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's move on to the issue at hand.
Obfuscation of amendments is always a challenge on town meeting floor. Aaron, it looked like you might want something to say.
Well, I think everyone's been very diplomatic, but I think it's absolutely appalling what went on at that finance committee meeting. The things that were said that were completely inaccurate, just appalling. Also, if a person were to look at the town charter, the finance committee's brief is to offer a recommendation on each article which has financial implications. There is nothing about altering the articles. It's insane. And I don't mean to lose my temper, but wow. So I hope the town meeting will certainly rebuke them on that, as they did on the Muzzy Ford issue last year.
I understand this has never happened before, this kind of amendment, and I agree. Liz?
One of the things that was said, one of the reasons was also that the school administration was capable of doing really fantastic work anywhere we put them. And as a longtime educator, I was honestly really offended because I know that the school administration is the heart of what makes a district, move and live. And our administration, who I have deep respect for, have been working in suboptimal conditions for a very, very long time. And I can only imagine what everyone will be capable of when you don't have to work in a building that is literally fighting you back as you go through your day. So I just want to personally state very clearly that the reason for spending money for building a new administration building is because the work that you do is incredibly high level, it's incredibly complex and collaborative, and that work supports the students in our district, and that's why it's so important.
I think someone said once, I think it was Hank, that to move to Hillside is moving from a very bad situation to a very bad situation, just not quite as bad. And that's not something that I think we think is appropriate for any length of time. So I'm glad you spoke up, Aaron, because there's certainly some of those feelings seething, and I think it's important to recognize the FinCom has helped us out at many times, but this is hard to work with.
I just also, on a much calmer note, Dan, could I request that your transportation memo be somehow incorporated into the packet and released to the public so that people can also see that?
Yep. Yeah, especially because we want people to know the general issue that we're trying to solve. Madam Chair, I echo the comments, and we want to provide whatever support we can at town meeting so that this can move forward. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Andrea?
I guess I share what the sentiments that Aaron shared earlier. It was very, very disturbing to sit in that meeting and hear things said that were just wrong. I mean, in some instances, it was very disconcerting, particularly when we've had such a collaborative and a long-standing good relationship with members of the Finance Committee. So it was very disheartening to hear some of the comments made at that meeting. One of the comments that the Finance Committee Chair, Josh Levy, spoke about at the meeting and then also in his video presentation was a hesitancy to commit capital funding for the Emery Grover project until the comprehensive financing plan was worked out for Mitchell, Pollard, DPW, and Emery Grover. And I think that the way I understand how things work, to me, it's false to think that we're going to have a fully formed financing plan that includes our two large school building projects, Mitchell and Pollard, until we know whether the MSBA is going to partner with us. And that will not happen for a couple of years. Is that accurate to say? I mean, so to me, to premise not spending any capital funds on the need to have a financing plan, knowing that the town would like us to partner with the MSBA so that it's a lower impact to the taxpayer, but we're not going to know that for a period of years seems logically inconsistent to me. And so I would just, if it comes up at the floor of town meeting, hopefully that we can sort of address that. To me, that's a big glaring hole in that sort of logic that he put forward.
Madam Chair, to that point, today I visited a Needham resident who is a senior at Minuteman. He gave me a tour of the building. I was curious to hear about Aaron's work at the Minuteman committee meeting last night. And it was great to have this student take me around and go around. While I was there, I ran into, there were actually a couple superintendents there. Lori Hunter from Concord Carlisle. Concord has been rejected 4 times for their middle school project from the MSBA.
Wow.
And she said, we're going to go it alone. So it speaks to what you're talking about, that even if we apply, that does not mean, that could be many years. So there's a lot of work that still needs to go beyond that. I would also add that I think the longer that we're sitting doing some of these more recent meetings with Pollard and Mitchell and High Rock, I would very much like to, and I'll offer now, that sometime this winter, February, maybe after the budget's launched, I'd like to invite the design team in to do a couple workshops with you and with community members to talk about the whole middle school piece. I think we understand Mitchell and what folks and what we need to do there, but I think the whole conversation about 6-8 and the middle school, we have a program, but the disposition of the High Rock building and Pollard and what you may want to do, because I think that will inform what you want to do. That's not going to happen that will not be all wrapped up in a nice bow for Maytown meeting, I guess is my point. I think that's going to need some more discussion. Then, of course, the MSBA is the wild card for funding and any of that. I think the piece, I'll just say that I'm excited for you to go to town meeting on Monday so it can happen and we can move on to other things and get the support. I will say it's been a little disappointing and frustrating when asked by several folks, including the Finance Committee, a lot of questions that we've answered, but then those don't seem to satisfy, so that has been frustrating. That a lot of work has gone into this most recent proposal, and it's hard to get to yes, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So,
Frankly, I felt that the questions were asked, extensive answers provided, took a lot of work, and I think I felt, I might be wrong, maybe they considered them carefully, but I felt they were brushed aside and not paid attention to. And I hate to see us doing extra work that doesn't have any import to the folks who asked for it. Michael?
So the point that Andrew made about the MSBA is clear. We've made it multiple times. But I think it's really important to also make clear the point that you just did. We had a plan. We put together a plan for what we believed needed to be done. It was very clear that was not an affordable plan in the time frame that we had. And so the work we're doing now may change what we do. And it's going to take time. Right? Even if we had a wonderful idea what to do, we have a lot of work to do in the community. There is just no way that we will be ready to go in 6 months or a year. And so let's also remember that at 5% cost escalation, a $20 million project goes up by $1 million every year. I mean, it stuns me to see financial people thinking that kicking the can down the road doesn't have financial implications. It sure does. It's about 5% a year. We need to get this project done. Not to mention the fact that we are currently in the absolute best environment in history to borrow money. Interest rates will not be this low forever. The longer we wait, the more likely interest rates will also be higher. So, and I think town meeting will understand that, will appreciate that, but we need to keep reminding people the longer you delay something that you know you need to do, the more expensive it is. And I think that's a message that will resonate with town meeting, and frankly should have resonated with the Finance Committee. I will be a little more polite and say I think there was a lot of magical thinking going on at that meeting. And it was a little surprising, frankly. So.
I heard when we were talking at the open house the other day, I was standing with Aaron talking to someone about the idea of why won't this delay Pollard and Mitchell? And your explanation of the financing, et cetera, was really helpful to me. So I'll be looking for when we're going to formulate some of the thoughts for town meeting floor. I'll be looking to hear from some of you about what people wonder about and how we can best explain the fact that this is a parallel track, that it's going on right now, looking at Pollard and Mitchell, that it is going to take a long time, and that we have to plan really carefully for it in order to preserve or to pay attention to our taxpayers and debt and financing through our town.
I think it's also important to make the point, which Dan has made very articulately many times, that it was starting in 1990 when studies by the town suggested that Emery Grover needed major work and an overhaul, and many subsequent studies to that, I think 5 or 6 studies subsequent to that. So to say that we, need to do Mitchell first or something, right? We've done 5 schools, the library, the senior center, the Rosemary Pool Complex, one of the DPW things, work at the RTS. We've done a lot of things before Emery Grover, and it just can't wait forever. It can't wait anymore. What windows are falling out?
It's a point I tried to make, maybe I made it too gently in that video presentation, is that building after building after building after building, including some that I consider not as important, but it's a town-wide thing. Building after building has gone before this, and I'm going to give Andrea credit for the kicking the can down the road. I think she said that first about this project, and then it was said again, but it's time. The time has come. There are no more buildings left that are being done right now. We need to do this. But, and I think in a way now it's too polite. I should have maybe been a little more forceful on that score.
Well, your message, if I may, your message is to town meeting. So I
Yes,
think your message
right.
was appropriate.
That's right.
I mean, that at the end of
Good
the day
point.
is the audience, is town meeting, so.
And I think that's an important thing.
Yeah.
I think most of us think that town meeting members can think for themselves and look at the facts and look at what's happened and look at what our best interests are for our town. And that's where we would like to answer any questions that they have, because we believe that they will be able to make an excellent decision about this. So we are planning to meet to discuss how best to move forward. And I will reach out to the moderator, who I believe is away, to ask what options we have for presenting more information at the town meeting.